My mission is to help make our food system healthier, more sustainable and ethical. In a market where consumers are making more informed decisions about the food they buy, I believe that food businesses catering to these needs will be the most successful. I'm Michael Fox, CEO and co-founder of shiitake mushroom company Fable Food. For years, I've been obsessed with our food system. Welcome to my podcast where I talk shiitake with successful chefs, food industry executives and entrepreneurs to learn about what's led to their success in the food industry. Today I have the incredible honour of talking shiitake with Professor Peter Singer. In 1974, Peter wrote the book Animal Liberation, which laid the philosophical foundation for the vegan movement. This book played a huge role in my going vegan and co-founding Fable, so Peter has been hugely influential in my life. He's done the same for many others too. In addition to helping lead the animal rights movement, he's helped lead the effective altruism movement, and this year he retired as Professor of Bioethics at Princeton University. He's arguably the world's most famous living philosopher, and I'm incredibly proud to say he's been a big supporter of Fable over the years, from when we first met mushroom foraging in Melbourne until today. I'm honoured to present to you Professor Peter Singer. So next year marks the 50th anniversary of your seminal book, Animal Liberation. It's widely considered to have laid the philosophical foundation for the vegan movement. And it's, as we've talked about, it's been hugely influential in my life, setting me down the path of veganism and to start Fable. How do you feel now about where humanity and its treatment of animals is 49 years after writing that book?
Well, not really all that great, I would have to say. There certainly has been some progress, and that's encouraging. There is an animal movement that is concerned about factory farmed animals in particular. That's really important. That really didn't exist 50 years ago. There have been some laws passed in some jurisdictions, most notably in the European Union, but also in some states of the United States, California, for example, that give animals somewhat more room to move around, really basic things, stretch their limbs that they didn't have before. But factory farming itself has actually grown a lot in that 50 years. The world's population has grown. Countries like China have gotten more prosperous and people can afford to buy more meat, and so more meat is being produced. So in many respects, you would have to say things have got worse for animals than they were 50 years ago. And that's really quite distressing, because I do think of factory farming as a vast atrocity, involving literally hundreds of billions of sentient beings.
And I know you've followed the meat alternative space for at least the last 5 years, but probably for many years before that, eating a plant-based diet yourself for so long. How do you view its impact to date?
Again, it's a little bit like factory farming as a whole. It's made some progress. There are products out there. They're on supermarket shelves. When I started thinking about not eating meat, you had to go to a special health food store to buy any of these products. And I have to say they were pretty bad compared to today's products. So that's progress. But it's still a very small minority of the meat that's sold. It doesn't compare with the vast quantities of animal products being sold. And so far, it hasn't broken out of that niche market. There are more people who are like not vegan or vegetarian, but reducitarians. They reduce the amount of meat, and occasionally they have these products. That's good. They're certainly more available on restaurant menus. That makes it easier for me to go out with friends and find things that we can eat. But they're still a bit pricey. They're still more expensive typically than the meat products. And as far as the, lab-grown meat or cultivated meat or cellular meat or whatever, yes, I've been interested in that space for a lot more than 5 years, maybe 25 years. And it's always been, give us another 5 years and we'll be there. And it's still, give us another 5 years and we'll be there, in the sense of, the product exists. I've actually eaten cellular chicken in Singapore where it's allowed to be sold. But it's nowhere near competitive in price with chicken. And, I can't really say how closely it resembles it in taste, but I don't see that as making an impact for quite some time.
Can you take us through the basics of, and this is probably hard to just do the basics, but the basics of consequential utilitarianism and how you apply that to animals and the treatment of animals?
Sure. So let's just get the term straight. A consequentialist view is one that says an action is right or wrong depending on its consequences. So if it has the best consequences of any action open to you, then that's the right thing for you to do. If it doesn't, if there's something else you could have done that would have better consequences, then it wasn't the right thing to do. You could have done something better. And that's a family of theories, consequentialism, because there can be different views about what it is to have the best consequences, right? The term best consequences is open to different interpretations. Now, utilitarians, going back to Jeremy Bentham at the end of the 18th century, said by best consequences, we mean what will do the most to increase happiness and reduce suffering and misery. And so that's the utilitarian view, that those are the consequences you ought to look at. And the right action is the one that will do the most to reduce pain and suffering and increase happiness and pleasure.
And then applying that to the treatment of animals?
Well, I think actually it's one of the really good things about utilitarians that even going right back to the 18th century when there were no laws at all in the United Kingdom or anywhere else really to protect animals, Bentham and his successors, John Stuart Mill, others, said since animals can feel pain and pleasure presumably as well, their pains and pleasures can't. This is not just focused on human happiness. This is focused on the happiness of all beings capable of experiencing happiness. So right from the start, the utilitarian view was that, yes, animals can. And in particular, we shouldn't be cruel to them. We shouldn't cause them unnecessary pain. Those things were there from the beginning.
So you and a team of people that you work with spent many years advocating for McDonald's to move to using only cage-free eggs, which earlier this year they achieved. Obviously, they're still using chickens, and many of the ethical issues surrounding chickens, the use of chickens in agriculture still apply. Yet you advocated for the move to cage-free eggs. Can you take us through how that fits with consequential utilitarianism?
Certainly, I think it fits very clearly with that consequential view, because we need to try to get to a world with less pain and suffering in it, and specifically less pain and suffering for animals. So how do we do that? Now, we can just say, hey, everybody, let's just stop eating them. Let's just all eat plant-based diets, go completely vegan, and that will solve the problem. And it would solve the problem and would have wonderful environmental consequences as well, of course, if everyone were to do that. But, it didn't take very long for me to realize after publishing Animal Liberation that while some people were responding to the message in that way, they were a very small minority, and most people were not responding in that way. So how do you reduce the pain and suffering that we inflict on animals while acknowledging that it's not going to be the case that people will go in one leap to being vegan? So the answer, I think, to that is we try to move one step at a time. It's a long march, and you can only achieve a long march by continuing to move forward. So if you have a system of producing eggs where the hens are crammed, and literally crammed, I've seen it, into cages, and so you have a cage about this big, and it maybe is the total living space for 4 or 5 hens. And even if just one bird were in that cage, she couldn't stretch her wings fully. And there's 4 or 5 of them, and they're rubbing up against each other. They're rubbing against the wire. Their feathers are getting rubbed off. Their skin is getting rubbed raw. And the dominant, more aggressive birds are pecking at the weaker birds, who, of course, can't escape because they're all locked into this small cage. That's, I think, a really horrendous life for egg-laying hens, and they're going to be in those cages for essentially all their laying life, which might be a year, might be 18 months, and after that they get thrown out and killed. So one way you can reduce pain and suffering is by saying hens shouldn't be in these cages. They should either be in much larger cages where they can move around, or they should be, somewhere where they can walk freely on the floor. Ideally, they should be free range, able to go outside. But at least they should be out of the cages and perhaps in a large shed where they can walk around. So, if you can get an organization like McDonald's to make that commitment that they will stop using eggs from caged hens, and they use, I think, if I remember the figures, about 2 billion eggs a year. So there's a large impact on the egg supply. Then you will reduce suffering. And that's something that you can do. My friends and I particularly give credit to Henry Spiro, who's no longer with us, but I think was a huge innovative animal rights campaigner in the last quarter of the 20th century. If we can get McDonald's to commit to getting rid of cages, even if it's going to take them some time to do it, because at the time that we started with McDonald's, there simply wasn't enough, cage-free egg production to meet their needs. But if we can commit to them, well, that will reduce the suffering of hundreds of millions of hens that would be laying these 2 billion eggs that they would use. And that is what's been happening in the United States. When I started writing Animal Liberation, I would say pretty close to 100% of the egg-laying hens were in these small wire cages. Now it's down to, I think, just over half, or a little bit over half still, which is really bad. And I should mention in the entire European Union, these cages are prohibited now, but in the United States, they're not. So still, that's hundreds of millions of hens who are no longer in cages, not all due to McDonald's, but all due to a campaign against McDonald's, against other fast food chains, against some of the big supermarket chains, to say, shift your egg supply away from caged hens. And that's a lot of suffering that's been prevented. As I say, it's far from the goal that we would like to reach, but it was an achievable goal. And a consequentialist ethic will say, do what has the best consequences. And if simply, standing up saying, hey, everybody go vegan, doesn't have good consequences, or, just very few people go vegan. Whereas if saying to McDonald's, shift your egg supply away from caged hens, does affect the lives of millions of hens in a positive way, that's what you ought to do.
As you know, we've just launched a new shiitake mushroom ingredient designed to be blended with beef. Like the founding of Fable, your philosophies have been hugely influential in how we think about launching a product like this. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this product directly, or the philosophical side of this product directly.
Right. I think it's an interesting step forward. I don't actually know how much of the beef you're replacing. So if somebody uses your product, is it like 50-50, that it's half mushrooms and they're using only half as much beef, or is it less than that or more than that?
Yeah, depending on the recipe that the end customer is aiming for, it's so far it's been between a third mushrooms and half mushrooms.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, obviously you're doing this because you believe that this product will catch on and have wide use. Whereas if you had a plant-only product, and I know you do have some plant mushroom-only products, I've eaten some of them and I find them tasty myself, but you're thinking that you will be able to reach a wider range of customers with this blended product than you would if you're a 100% plant-based product. Is that right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, the 100% plant-based products or mushroom-based products, they're doing well, and we do get more meat eaters. It's more than half of our customer base are meat eaters, but obviously it's also a lot of vegetarians and vegans eating the product, which is good, but they're already doing the right thing. So yeah, the goal with this product is, you touched on it before, the challenge with plant-based meat products to date. A big one is cost. They're more expensive than animal meat products, and cost is a massive driver for why people buy food. The other big driver is obviously taste and texture. And in blind taste tests with blending the shiitake mushrooms in with the beef, the majority of people in blind taste tests prefer it to 100% beef because you get the additional umami flavor of the mushrooms in with the beef. So it means we've got a product that tastes better than beef, it's cheaper than 100% beef, and then you get the ethical environmental benefits of it only being half beef instead of completely beef. So yeah, obviously vegans and vegetarians aren't going to eat it because it's got meat in it, and that's good because they're already doing the right thing. We're not trying to convert vegans and vegetarians, but we're trying to convert the meat eaters who want to reduce meat consumption but struggle to because of cost or taste and texture. They don't want to sacrifice taste and texture. We're trying to come up with a product that satisfies them and gets them to at least halve their ground beef consumption.
Right. I don't quite follow how if plant-based products are more expensive than meat products in general, your blended thing is less expensive.
Yeah, good question. So, because there's the flavors and the fats of beef in the product, we can produce, we don't have to do all of the things to the mushrooms that we do with our plant based products because we can leverage some of the flavor and the texture of the beef. So, there's, our products are all natural and minimally processed, but we can do even less processing with this product. Also, the format, because it's a ground beef product, we can use a different type of shiitake mushroom stem compared with what we use in our pulled plant-based product. So we're able to have even less ingredients, less processing, and it actually allows us to produce an ingredient that ends up being cheaper than the beef.
Okay, well, congratulations, and I do hope that this product will reach a wide range of consumers, and of course, as you say, they will be meat eaters. They won't be vegetarians and vegans. So if it does, and if it then reduces the consumption of beef among those customers by between a third and a half, you say, I think that will be a good thing. It will be a good thing for animals. It will be a good thing for the environment because beef is particularly bad for greenhouse gas emissions. Cows emit large quantities of methane. So it will be good for the climate, it will be good for the environment more broadly because we have to grow a lot of grain to feed all of those cows. And a lot of the soy crop, for example, a lot of the clearance of the Amazon goes to grow soy, 70% of which is fed to the animals. So I think it will have environmental benefits as well as benefits for animals. And again, while I would rather we got away from beef and other animal products altogether, this does seem to be something that an ethic that looks towards consequences can support because the consequence will be better than people just continuing to eat 100% beef.
So some in the vegan community take a very purist approach to plant-based eating and take the view that hybrid products like this are just as bad as eating meat. And despite developing this product, I can empathize with that view. Like you said, it would obviously be a much better outcome if people stopped eating meat completely. But as you say, the consequences of having just plant-based products, it's still less. Meat alternative products are still less than 1% of the total meat market. So we see that the consequences of having the blended product, we can hopefully have an even bigger impact. But what would you say to purist vegans, or how would you encourage purist vegans to think about this?
Well, I would encourage purists to think about the consequences of what they're saying. And is it really going to help animals at all to take this purist line? Now, if they believe that somehow if you did not produce this blended product, these people would stop eating beef, then they would be right. Okay. But there's no evidence that would happen, right? As I said, it's 50 years since Animal Liberation was published almost, and beef consumption is increased actually over those years. So unless people have some radical new strategy and they would say, well, if people had to choose between eating 100% beef products and eating 0% beef products, they would choose the 0%. If they can't show why that would be, and I take it that they can't, then I think they're wrong to say it's all or nothing. We need to try to reduce the amount of animal suffering. We need to try to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. Those are huge, major problems, both of them. And if there's not a strategy for getting people to shift to entirely plant-based diets, then I think what you're doing with a blended product is the best thing we can do in these regrettable circumstances where people, even people who know about factory farming and some of the arguments are still continuing to eat meat.
Do you have thoughts on what we as a company should be mindful of as we take this product to market? Like, are there risks or ethical traps we might find ourselves in, and how should we think through these?
Well, I mean, there's always ethical traps, right? I suppose people could say, hey, there's too much mushroom in this. Let's cut it back. Let's make a product with just 10% mushroom. And, you could be tempted, I guess, the kind of argument that we're talking about could go saying, well, 10% is still better than 0%. But obviously, if you can get people to accept a product that has a third or a half of plant-based content, you're doing better. So I'd hope that you would say, no, this is a product that the consumers like, that we can sell, and that's the product that we want to put out there, because that'll have a much larger impact on animal suffering and the environment than if we were to switch to a product with a significantly lower plant-based content.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. It's always a pleasure and honour to speak with you. Yeah, thanks again for inspiring me to go vegan, me to start Fable, and really appreciate your thoughts on all of this. It's wonderful speaking with you.
That's great. Good. And good luck with the product. I understand you're in the United States and you're trying to launch these new lines there, which of course is a hugely important market. Not that Australia doesn't count at all, but the US is 15 times the population, something like that. So yeah, good luck with that.
Thanks, Peter. Appreciate it.